they now have a mission scheduled to leave in 2011, arriving at Phobos to ultimately land on Phobos in 2012, and it will be in the position to actually retrieve some samples of whatever bits and pieces of technology might still be there in the form of battered, regolith or soil or, actually little bits and pieces of, let's say, computer chips, and to bring them home. The Phobos Grunt mission by the Russians is a sample return mission from Phobos, meaning they have a little sub-spacecraft with the Phobos Grunt major spacecraft. They will land that little spacecraft separately on Phobos, that's the plan, while Phobos Grunt orbits nearby. They will pick up pieces, they will put it in a capsule, and they will fire it off so that it escapes the gravitational field of Mars and encounters, a year or so later, the Earth and comes into the atmosphere and is picked up and is opened up in laboratories where this sample from Phobos is going to be analyzed in Russian laboratories. Well, they're now in the position, based on the data which is being released agonizingly slowly, to turn that mission, Phobos Grunt, into the first technology retrieval mission in the modern history of the Earth's global space programs. And I think that's, in fact, exactly what they're going to do.
We got to kind of, I guess, clarify a little bit as well what we're kind of talking about here. What is Phobos? Some have said, obviously, if you look at the articles that you guys have up on enterprisemission.com, you suggest that it's actually a spaceship, and that's outrageous. We got to talk about
Why is
that.
It outrageous?
Well, the thing is here that I want to try to get to is,
come on, Heinrich. Why is it outrageous? It's only outrageous because you've been told it can't happen.
It's nothing is impossible.
What is it that J.B. Haldane, who was that famous British scientist, said some years ago back in the 1940s? He said the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine.
I believe that's
Why
true, though.
is it unbelievable, given all the amazing wonders that we've seen in the 20th and 21st century in space, why is it so unbelievable to entertain the idea that, in fact, the solar system might be filled with artificial objects that we just haven't been told about?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
If you separate the data from the official pronouncements, if you get it in your mind that you don't need permission to reach the conclusion based on the evidence itself, then you just look at the evidence, and the evidence is overwhelming. Yes, they've lied to us, and it's artificial. It's when you have to stop and get their permission to think the, quote, unthinkable that you run into trouble. In many areas, not just in space science. This is kind of the watchword for how we shouldn't be living in the 21st century anyway, because too many officials lie to us routinely, because knowledge is power, and they want to keep knowledge of this caliber to themselves and not let the rest of us in on the secret. Well, the secret is not a secret because it's being revealed drip, drip, drip constantly in every data release. You just have to open your eyes, understand how science works, understand what you're seeing in these imagery, which is stunning, repetitive, regular, artificial geometry. Carl Sagan, who is probably our best-known ambassador in these realms, no longer with us, unfortunately, told us all many, many years ago that on Earth, the first evidence of intelligence is revealed by the geometric regularity of its design. Well, when you look at Phobos and you look at it on those images, there's no doubt in my mind, and any reasonable observer's mind, that there is stunning regular geometry. I come back to that. It's regular geometry, like blocks and streets and buildings on the surface of this tiny moon, which tells me it's not a moon at all. It's, in fact, an ancient derelict space station left by an ancient civilization. And again, if it was the only example we'd ever found in my 30 years of doing this, I'd say, okay, it's pretty far out. But Phobos is only the latest example of thousands upon thousands of examples of artificial geometry and technology and science that we've seen all over the solar system. So to me, it's kind of like all that has been foreplay coming to the threshold, to the precipice, to the objective of letting us in on our real history. And I'm betting that archaeologically it's going to begin later this year, probably in September, probably at the ESA meeting in Rome, which is going to discuss Phobos in great detail prior to the conveyance of the ESA data to the Russians at another meeting on Phobos to be held in October in Moscow, I think the end of this year is in fact the year when we are told officially Phobos might really be more interesting than we've been telling you, and we got to go with Phobos Grunt and find out. So 2010 then becomes the year we make contact.
How is our ancient past connected with what is out there in the solar system? Is that is that our old technology out there that you're talking about, or is there someone else's technology there?
Well, bottom line, we don't know, because we don't have ground truth. Now, I'm pretty sure that the officialdom, the space agencies of the world, the Russians, the Indians, the Chinese, the Americans, Europeans, I bet those guys know. We on the outside don't know, because we have to make inferences based on the data that we're looking at. But going back to the most striking piece of anomalous data, which began me on this investigation, almost 30 years ago now, the so-called face on Mars, I would say we're probably dealing with ourselves. We're probably dealing with an ancient aspect of the human race, which is so much older and so much more amazing than we have been allowed to believe. And the fairy tales were told about Sumer, that Earth civilization only began 6,000 years ago, in fact, is just a fairy tale, that we're millions of years old, and that we haven't been allowed to see our real history and know who we really are because of whatever political rationale in the minds of governments. They have reached the conclusion that we're not ready, that knowledge is not for the profane. There's also a really important religious element to all this, because when you begin looking at secret societies, when you begin looking at the mystery schools which have handled this kind of discussion for millennia, you find that those people are infiltrated again and again through and through all the space agencies of the world. So in essence, we are being allowed by a priesthood access to information that they have known and encoded in sacred texts going back thousands of years. Again, I refer you to the Vedas. And it's only now in the 21st century that they are crafting the means, I think, to politically bring the current generation into the big picture. And again, Heinrich, this is only a model. This is only an idea, a projection, because politically they could decide tomorrow, they're not ready, and they could blow off the entire timetable. But given all the clues that have been laid, and given all the little bits of information that have been dropped, and the little winks and nods along the line, including the latest from NASA just this week regarding the stunning information from the Phoenix mission, I really believe that 2010 is, in fact, as Arthur said, the year they let us know, the year we make contact.
Is Phobos a ship that is cloaked to look like a moon? Is it, if I can use this term, organic ship?
You are so inventive. No, it's really just a bashed and battered piece of technology. Look, we have the International Space Station in orbit right now upstairs, which a lot of nations from all over the world, including the European, Space Agency, is participating in. Imagine if it was in a high enough orbit so that atmospheric friction wouldn't bring it down in millions of years, and a future Earth team of astronauts were to visit the space station. They would find a bashed and battered object, a derelict, orbiting without attitude control, without energy, without air, without anything, just a derelict, and it would look as pitted and grimy and as natural as Phobos, but of course it wouldn't be. It would be an ancient derelict piece of technology. If you leave anything exposed long enough in space over millions of years, that's how we know that we're dealing with something that's incredibly ancient. It will be difficult, if you don't really land on it and actually pick up pieces, to judge from afar whether it's natural or artificial. This is one of the big insights. You can't tell looking at these objects whether they're natural or artificial, because over enough time, given that they're all made of natural materials, natural elements, the natural fabric of the solar system, how do you decide what's artificial and natural if the artificial stuff is made of the same chemical elements as iron and calcium and carbon as artificial things and natural things all mixed together? So it's really difficult a priori unless you have ground truth, unless you have a sample, unless you find